love that I love their simplicity, but they're not caught up in more of the Hollywood scene. And yeah, for us, it could have been very different, could have been even darker.
After the divorce, James Hetfield's wife finally breaks the silence about what destroyed their 30-year marriage. James Hetfield, the rock icon who once credited his wife, Francesca, with saving his life.
I would love to thank my wife, Francesca, for saving my life many times. My children, all three of you are here. Thank you for teaching me how to love.
Was suddenly filing for a divorce. For months, she remained silent, fueling endless rumors about what happened behind closed doors. Her statement exposes dark secrets that explain everything about their messy split. But why did she wait so long to speak out? And why is her truth shaking the metal world today?
Fear was a big motivator in that for me. Losing my family was the thing that scared me so much. That was the bottom I hit, that my family's going to go away because of my behaviors that I brought home from the road.
When news broke that James Hetfield and his wife, Francesca, were getting divorced after 25 years of marriage, the metal world went into shock. This wasn't just any celebrity breakup. This was the collapse of what seemed like rock's most solid foundation. After the divorce, James Hetfield's wife finally breaks the silence, and her words paint a picture that nobody expected. But the most shocking part wouldn't come until Francesca finally spoke out, breaking her silence in a way that stunned fans everywhere. Francesca Hetfield didn't hold back when she spoke to TMZ in August 2022. Her statement was short but devastating. She told the world she was extremely saddened by how their marriage ended. But there was something deeper in those words, something that revealed the real story behind one of metal's biggest scandals. The timing of her statement wasn't random either. She waited 3 full days after the divorce news went public before saying anything. Those 3 days tell a story of their own. What was she thinking during that time? What finally pushed her to break her silence when she could have? Stayed quiet forever? Her marriage to the Metallica frontman began back in 1992 when she worked as the band's costume designer. By 1997, they were married and building what looked like the perfect rock family. 3 kids, a massive fortune estimated at over $300 million, and a husband who publicly credited her with saving his life multiple times. But behind the scenes, something was rotting away at their foundation. The same issues that nearly destroyed them in 2001 were coming back with a vengeance. And this time, even Francesca's legendary patience couldn't fix what was broken. Most rock wives would never dream of throwing their multimillionaire husband out of the house. But Francesca Hetfield wasn't the most rock and roll wife. In 2001, she made a decision that shocked even James himself. She kicked the Metallica frontman out of their family home. This wasn't some minor marital spat. Hetfield was bringing toxic behaviors home from the road. His drinking had spiraled out of control. His anger issues were affecting their children. Francesca had reached her breaking point with a man worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The rock star later admitted that getting kicked out scared him more than anything else in his life. He told Joe Rogan that his wife did exactly the right thing. She forced him to face the reality that his road behaviors were poisoning their family life. Years later, when she finally broke her silence after the divorce, her words carried the weight of everything she had endured during those dark chapters. After the divorce, James Hetfield's wife finally breaks the silence about this period, and the pain in her words is obvious. She describes 30 years of ups and downs, but always with love. Those ups and downs weren't just normal marriage problems. They were in a constant battle between loving a man and watching him destroy himself. The 2001 intervention worked. Hetfield went to rehab for 7 weeks. He got sober. He learned how to be a better husband and father. For nearly 2 decades, their marriage seemed solid again. They moved to Colorado. They raised their 3 kids. The rock world saw them as proof that even the most damaged relationships could heal. But then, 2019 happened. Hetfield quietly entered treatment again. The demons he thought he'd conquered were back. And this time, the cycle that nearly destroyed them in 2001 was starting all over again. Francesca had already saved their marriage once through tough love. She'd already proven she could handle his addiction and recovery. But facing the same battles 20 years later must have felt like a nightmare on repeat. The divorce filing came in 2022, just 3 years after his return to treatment. The timing tells the real story. Francesca had given him another chance after rehab. She'd stood by him through another recovery. But something fundamental hadn't changed, and she finally decided she couldn't do it again. What makes this even more heartbreaking is the money factor. Walking away from a $300 million lifestyle isn't easy for anyone. But Francesca chose her peace over financial security. That decision alone shows how bad things must have gotten behind closed doors. The rock star's own words reveal just how much he depended on her. He called her his lifeline multiple times in interviews. He credited her with saving his life. But even being someone's lifeline gets exhausting when you have to do it over and over for 30 years. Now, fans are left wondering what happened in those final years of their marriage, and whether the same patterns that almost destroyed them in 2001 had simply become too much for even the strongest woman to handle. Behind Metallica's aggressive sound and James Hetfield's intimidating stage presence is a truth that would shock most metal fans. The man who wrote some of heavy metal's most powerful songs is one of the most emotionally fragile people in rock music. This revelation came during what fans now call the Brazilian breakdown. In May 2022, right around the time his divorce was becoming final, Hetfield did something unprecedented during a concert in Brazil. He admitted to 60,000 screaming fans that he was feeling insecure before taking the stage. This wasn't just pre-show nerves. This was a public confession from someone who'd spent 4 decades projecting nothing but strength and confidence. The crowd that night was witnessing the real James Hetfield, not the character he'd been playing since he was 19 years old. His 2021 interview with Apple Music's Zane Lowe revealed just how deep his insecurity really goes. Hetfield compared himself to the Wizard of Oz. He described being the man behind the curtain who's dying and struggling and freaking out, while everyone sees only the powerful image he projects. This comparison is devastating when you really think about it. The wizard was a fraud who fooled an entire kingdom. Was Hetfield saying his entire career was built on a lie? The pressure of performing for massive crowds while feeling completely hollow inside had been eating at him for decades. He admitted that he needs his bandmates to feel like he has any value at all. Without Metallica, he doesn't know who he is. That level of codependency explains so much about why his relationships struggled. His advice to other musicians reveals just how fragile his ego really is. He tells them never to read online comments unless they're feeling particularly secure. He warns that most artists are fragile and insecure people who get easily hurt by criticism. This advice comes from someone who's been dealing with fan opinions for over 40 years. If James Hetfield still can't handle negative comments after all this time, it shows that success and money don't heal emotional wounds. They just put a bigger spotlight on them. The Brazilian concert confession makes perfect sense when you understand this context. Hetfield was going through a divorce From the woman who'd been his emotional anchor for 30 years, his support system was crumbling, and the insecurity he'd always carried was becoming impossible to hide. Francesca had seen this vulnerability up close for 3 decades. She'd watched him struggle with the disconnect between his public image and private reality. The strain of being married to someone who needed constant validation must have been overwhelming. Metal fans expect their heroes to be invincible. They want to believe that the aggression and power in the music come from a place of strength. Learning that it might come from deep insecurity and fear changes everything about how you hear those songs. The most disturbing part of this revelation is what it says about the entire metal genre. If even James Hetfield warns about emotional fragility, how many other metal icons are secretly struggling with the same issues? How many marriages and families have been destroyed by the pressure to maintain a completely fake image? But understanding Hetfield's fragility also makes his recovery journey more impressive, and it raises questions about whether his new relationship can survive the weight of his emotional needs in ways his marriage to Francesca ultimately couldn't. When James Hetfield entered rehab in 2001, most people assumed it was just about getting sober. But what happened during those 7 weeks was far more radical than anyone realized. The program didn't just treat his alcoholism, it completely dismantled his entire worldview and rebuilt him from scratch. Hetfield describes the experience as being stripped down to his bones. Everything he thought he knew about himself, his career, and his family, everything was taken away. The goal wasn't just sobriety, it was teaching him how to be human for the first time in his adult life. The most shocking revelation came when counselors told him that every human being is born perfect. For someone who'd built his entire identity on negativity, aggression, and survival tactics, this was revolutionary. Hetfield had spent his whole life believing that flaws were just part of who he was. The program taught him that his intense lifestyle wasn't inevitable. His anger, his need to fight for everything, and his inability to trust people, these weren't character traits. They were learned behaviors that could be changed. Hetfield learned that he'd been trying to buy friendships his whole life because he didn't know how to form genuine connections. He'd been wearing masks constantly because he was afraid of showing weakness. He'd been performing even in his most private moments because he didn't know how to just exist as himself. The rehab counselors traced his problems back to childhood trauma. His father left when he was young. His mother died when he was a teenager. He joined Metallica when he was just 19 and never learned basic life skills that most adults take for granted. For 7 weeks, they taught him how to live like a normal person, how to have conversations without performing, how to handle emotions without numbing them, how to be in relationships without needing to control everything. The transformation seemed miraculous. Hetfield came out of treatment talking about priorities and family life and balance. He started giving interviews about how rehab was like college for your head. He seemed genuinely happy for the first time in years. But here's what makes this story tragic instead of inspiring. Despite everything he learned, despite 18 years of apparent stability, Hetfield still ended up back in treatment in 2019. The marriage still ended in divorce. The same patterns that nearly destroyed him in 2001 found their way back into his life. This raises uncomfortable questions about recovery and change. If someone can have such a profound therapeutic experience and still relapse decades later, what does that say about the possibility of lasting change? Were the problems just too deep to fix permanently? Or did something happen that undid all that progress? Francesca lived through both versions of her husband. She saw the broken man who went into treatment in 2001, and she saw the transformed person who came out. She also saw him gradually slip back into old patterns and she made the painful decision that she couldn't go through another cycle of destruction and recovery. The 7-week program gave them 18 good years together, but it couldn't give them a lifetime, and that might be the most heartbreaking part of their entire story. Fans would only understand how deeply heartbreaking it was when Francesca finally broke her silence after the split, choosing words that revealed just how heavy those 30 years had been. When James Hetfield moved his family from the San Francisco Bay Area to Colorado, most people assumed it was just about wanting more space or a quieter lifestyle. But his own words reveal a much deeper frustration that was slowly poisoning his marriage and his sense of identity. Hetfield felt suffocated by what he saw as liberal hypocrisy in the Bay Area. He describes people who talked constantly about diversity and tolerance, but only accepted you if you agreed with their specific worldview. The final straw came when his hunting hobby made him a social outcast in his community. And it's right here, after years of silence and speculation, that James Hetfield's wife finally breaks silence after the divorce, and what she revealed painted a heartbreaking picture fans never expected. In her brief but devastating statement, Francesca admitted, "After 30 years of ups and downs, but always with a lot of love, I am extremely saddened that my marriage has come to this." Those words weren't just a comment on their split. They were a window into 3 decades of struggle, resilience, and love that ultimately couldn't survive the cycle of addiction, recovery, and relapse. While James Hetfield's wife finally broke the silence, her husband had already been vocal about feeling like a stranger in his neighborhood. He couldn't show up with a deer on his car bumper without facing judgment. His version of eating organic didn't align with the approved environmental policies of Marin County. This wasn't just about hunting or politics, it was about feeling like he had to perform even in his personal life. The same man who'd spent decades wearing masks on stage was now having to wear masks in his community. He couldn't be authentic anywhere, and that pressure was destroying him from the inside. The move to Colorado represented freedom in ways that went far beyond geography. In the mountains, Hetfield could hunt without judgment. He could express his actual beliefs without social consequences. He could exist as himself instead of constantly moderating his personality to fit in. Francesca's connection to Colorado made the move seem natural. She'd grown up there after being born in Argentina, so it wasn't just about James escaping California's political climate. But the timing suggests that the Bay Area's social pressure had become a significant source of stress in their marriage. Living somewhere that made him feel like an outsider for 3 decades must have taken a psychological toll. When you're already struggling with insecurity and identity issues, having your community reject your lifestyle choices adds another layer of isolation. The irony is devastating when you think about it. Hetfield had found sobriety, gotten his family life together, and achieved massive success. But he still couldn't find a place where he felt comfortable being himself. Even with hundreds of millions of dollars, he couldn't buy acceptance in his neighborhood. Colorado gave him the freedom to be authentic, but it came too late to save his marriage. The damage from years of feeling like he had to hide parts of himself had already accumulated. Moving didn't fix the fundamental problems that had been building for decades. The relocation also highlights how different James's and Francesca's social needs might have been. She'd grown up in Argentina and Colorado, so she was comfortable with different kinds of communities. But James had spent most of his adult life touring and performing, and he'd never really learned how to exist in normal social settings. Their different comfort levels with California's social expectations might have created tension that neither of them fully understood at the time. When one person in a marriage feels constantly judged, while the other feels at home, it creates an imbalance that's hard to resolve. The Colorado years were supposed to be their fresh start, but they ended up being the final chapter of their marriage, which makes you wonder whether geographic solutions can ever really fix deeper psychological and relational problems. This makes his new relationship even more intriguing. What is Adriana Gillett getting from James that Francesca never experienced? So what do you think? Could their marriage have survived if Hetfield had faced his demons earlier? And will his new relationship with Adriana Gillett be strong enough to last where his first marriage couldn't? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. So, thanks for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one.